I'm a big fan of buying existing business. Why? Because they dealt with all the money losing 2 years beginning. And then what are we seeing? That children of business owners don't want to take over their parents' business.
Yep.
The way I think about it is whether it's real estate or business, and then it's just extra zeros, but always I think of what is the ultimate goal? That we have some sort of passive income after tax that covers our expenses as a starting point.
Yep. Yeah, we share similar philosophies. First goal is get income, create a comfortable lifestyle. $250,000, $500,000, so you can live comfortably, provide for your family, and you have some excess you could begin to invest in. For me, for most people who I serve, I grew up underprivileged. We moved from Jamaica at 5, grew up in the hood essentially in Fort Lauderdale. And grandfather started a landscaping business. Just hustled on the weekends after work. That turned into something pretty meaningful and employed a bunch of people, had citywide contracts and stuff like that. Grandpa went to retire, walked away from that business. We didn't even know about, hey, take over grandpa's business. It's already, netting 6 figures, whatever it was at the time. And he just walked away from all his clients. A few years later, when I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I'm like, man, if I knew what I know now, it would have been way easier for me to get grandpa's business that already had city contracts, corporate contracts, 100-something homes on recurring revenue versus my startup struggle. The people I typically are talking to are high-income people that want ownership, and they don't have the time to start from scratch, or they are underestimating how difficult it is to figure out all of the things. So I agree.
So if the idea, I always think that initial to cover, like you said, the 250 to 500, it's 2 options, right? So like I think of like a startup, over time, over budget. So, right, so you go in, when I think of the startup, and a lot of people don't have this in their mind. It's, okay, this is gonna cost, take for instance, we're filming in the studio, so we built out the studio. I thought it was gonna take X amount of time, X amount of money. It was double the time, double the money. Not good or bad, but I kind of knew that as a backup. So you always gotta plan what that is. Plus, while that's happening, that's money out the door. Year 1, year 2. But you also have a lifestyle. You may have your rent, your car and stuff like that. That's one type of bucket. Or, like you're saying, your grandpa, right? He had the landscaping business, and there's dry cleaning businesses, there's gas stations, there's so many, and there's databases of businesses that are for sale. And I was telling my kids this, find these businesses that are making net positive income. Obviously, you have to go through the bank statements, look at every line item of expense. And now, if you're not a numbers person, you can kind of use AI to help you do the business number analytics. You can plug it in to Claude, OpenAI. And then the thing is, people are like, oh, but I don't have money. So many people would do seller financing on a business.
Yep.
Right? One option, right? The second option, and the whole thing of what it exists to the government, SBA loans,
Yep.
Small Business Administration loans. I'm not sure if it's 2 million, maybe it's 5 million.
Their credit capacity is 5 mil.
It's 5 mil,
Yep.
right?
That's a great size business.
With 5 mil, you're probably making a few $100,000 after paying your loan.
Yep.
Is it 90% or 80% financing?
You're touching on like how to buy this business, right? I typically focus on 3 ways. One, you just said, like creative financing, like through the seller. They're the best investors in the business because it's funded their lifestyle. They know it. They believe in it. Also, I would probably not do deals if it does not have seller financing in it, because to me that's an indication that the current owner doesn't see a long future in the business, and so that's kind of one of my check boxes. And then the SBA route, which is just leverage. So the SBA is like on paper 20% down conservatively, but there are instances where you can get it down to 5 or even 10%. If you get the seller to contribute capital, then their seller note or rollover will count as new equity injection. So let's say you're buying a business, simple math, $1 million. It does $250,000 in profit. Let's call it $300,000 in profit. and you're buying it for $1 million, you would need to put $100,000 down. The SBA would come in with the 90%, the 900K, and combined, you would give the owner $1 million. Now, what the SBA says is if the seller has another $100,000 in a seller note, they would reduce your new cash demands, and so you could possibly do this for $50,000 out of pocket to own a business that produces $300K in annual net profits.
And figure, let's say with principal and interest, it'll be 8%.
Yep, and typically like 8 to 10%, depending on the business profile and your credit profile. Yeah,
Sure.
Over 10 years amortization. So
Right.
it's
So
great.
figure, let's say it would be 10%. It's 100,000.
Yeah,
And you had 300,000. That means it's 200,000. There's a machine already running. There's
Yeah.
probably some employees,
yeah,
and then that's 200,000. So
Yeah.
imagine doing that a couple times.
I help people do this as a coach. I was doing it selfishly for myself, had an encounter with God, and got some clarity about how my life needed to be and the impact I needed to have. And so I started sharing all of my resources, my connections with a set few people. One of them now is in a deal which I'll anonymize, so not to jeopardize their NDA, but they're an HR consulting company. He's a 20-year HR exec, wanted to have some ownership to speed up his retirement. This business does about a little over $1 million, let's call it $1 million in net profits. It has been around for 20 years. The past 15 years, they have had a contract with a city or county organization that does 80% of their profits. So roughly $800,000 is been guaranteed by contract for the past 15 years. They put it up for sale and we're like, hey, this is great, but we need that contract in place. And so they got a 20-year extension. So just think about this. $1 million in profit, 800,000 of it guaranteed for 20 years. And out of pocket, he's only putting 5% down. So the numbers are about 250,000 he has to come out of pocket with. But for $250,000 out of pocket, year one, he steps into $1 million profitable business. After debt service, he may, clear $500,000 every single year for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And so there's not much, many other opportunities in place like that. They have 7 to 10 employees already, systems in place, government contracts in place. If he would have spent 2 years starting a business, it is very impossible, very unlikely for him to have come out after 2 years to have $1 million net profit business. But what he did is he said he spent the past 6 to 9 months learning about acquisitions, sourcing deals, and then the next 6 months closing the deals. And so like 12 months in, he's now way further along than if he would have just jumped out and tried to start an HR consulting business from scratch. So that's the power of this kind of thing.
And then what's the idea? Because I always see like kind of like private equity. They do like roll-ups. What's the concept there with a roll-up?
Roll up in private equity math is like 1 + 1 = 3. So what I mean by that is if we have that $1 million business, it has expenses, employees, rent, overhead, marketing fees, et cetera. It has a marketing agency, software, maybe a general manager. Let's just say it's like a med spa in downtown Miami. The owner's taking home $200,000. What the private equity does is they may buy 2, so $1 million each. But now they don't need to have 2 marketing agencies. Now they don't need 2 software subscriptions. Now maybe one general manager can roam between Brickell and Wynwood or whatever, right? And so now each business goes from 20% profits to maybe 30 or 35%. And so the more roll-ups they do, the numbers just make more sense. Each business is worth more. Because businesses are valued on a multiple of profit, the other thing that happens is, let's say a business under $5 million, you may pay 3 to 5 times profit for it. But over $5 million, you now are paying 8 to 10 times profit for it. So the idea is if you buy $3 or $4 million businesses, get them more efficient, and you paid $5 million for these $5 million businesses, you could then go sell them for 10, 15, $20 million. It's just like an arbitrage of math.
I've seen that. So just think about you've been able to manage an average of, let's say, 10% down.
Yep.
Right? So let's say it costs you, $5 million. So you put down $500,000.
Very realistic.
And then you worked it for 2-3 years. And all of a sudden now you sell it for $20 million.
Correct.
So on your $500,000, you're making $15 million. You've seen that? You've seen those?
1,000%.
Yeah.
I learned about this when I was early 20s, I was a little bit different. I started college at 16. I, started selling candy in middle school, that kind of thing.
Sure.
I was always wired differently. I just studied people. And so a couple of my early bosses told me to read Millionaire Mindset, and then over time, like Millionaire Next Door, Psychology of Money, The Algebra of Wealth. These are like some of the books about this. And what I've realized is that success leaves clues. And so I would network where people who had the life and, the income and stuff that I wanted. And I ran into a guy that said he flipped businesses like people flip cars and real estate. And I had never heard about this before. And he was Goldman Sachs gave him a bunch of money for a fund. And I helped him launch his family office. And that's what he was doing. He was rolling up these companies. And so I saw it firsthand where he pulled together and bought a business for about $27 million. And 18 months later, sold it for about $80 million.
Amazing.
And netted that difference. And it's just like numbers arbitrage. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that makes a lot of sense. Why is knowing math? I mean, I talk to people about business. There's many, many people with ideas. Hard to find people that understand and able to make the math simple. Why is it important to understand the math in business?
Numbers in general are probably the number one underrated thing that people don't focus on. And that's what really tells the story. And it wasn't until, operating a business and I almost went bankrupt, I realized how, everyone talks about revenue. Some people talk about profit. Very few talk about cash flow. And in that journey of trying to save myself from bankruptcy, being newly married, I just learned the numbers. And so I was always like a communicator and a sales guy. Even in private equity, I was, the sourcing side, relationship building side, and I avoided the spreadsheets. But I realized that's where the deals were, in the numbers, and how you structured deals, and which, waterfall effects or which capital came before or after. And I realized that the number of the sale or the business doesn't matter as much as the terms and as much as the math behind the terms. And I just saw the magic in that and how people took things that looked like it didn't make any sense or was unattractive. And because they understood the numbers, they made money on day one and they had no risk in the deal just because they understood the numbers. And so I just became a student of trying to understand what the numbers mean and how to understand it in a way that created upside.
Yeah, I've seen that in real estate. If you know the numbers and you know to work with banks, whether it's interest rates or getting up the profit, getting up the net income, and then just understanding the cash flow, right? If you lose sight of the cash flow, like every day, I look at my cash flow every single day.
Wow.
Because that's the pulse. It's only two things in America, right? It's like a widget or a service, right? You're selling one of the two, and then everything is just the cash flow. What are you selling it for? And then you're trying to create a value. What has been in this just the past, let's call it 12 months, businesses that you've either bought yourself or helped other people buy that you're super excited about, and why?
And I forgot to mention the third way I like to buy businesses, which is the one I'm most excited about and the one I'm going to share here. I'll talk about that and then land the plane. So the two previous ways are to buy businesses are with capital, right? Either debt through the SBA or creative finance and seller loan. The third way, which not many people talk about, is what I call buying a business through intellectual capital. And that is realizing that we have knowledge, experiences, relationships that, businesses in the 6 or early 7-figure range where they're still wearing a bunch of hats would love to get a quote unquote silent partner to be able to take some of the responsibility or some of the deliveries or deliverables off to help the business go. And so the idea is, 100% of a grape worth $1 million. Give Gamal 25%. He handles capital. He handles acquisition or whatever. In 12 months, we could be looking at a $3 million business, right? And so I have been focusing a lot of my acquisitions that way. So one in particular, because of my retail experience, is a health supplement. They help the aging population, and they had a great product, but couldn't figure out cash flow, marketing systems and distribution, which I had a lot of success with my previous company that I sold. Took a 20% equity position there, which is great for me because I don't have the amount of equity where I need to be in the day-to-day, but I have enough that it makes sense for me, that if we get sold for a couple $1 million, that 20% is meaningful. But also for the business owner, it gives them a way to compensate me outside of cash flow. Because let's say they don't have, let's say this business gets sold for $5 million. It's $1 million to me. They don't have $1 million to pay me for their services. So it's a win-win-win. Why I also like that business is that method of acquisition is because most businesses, when they go to sell, they are going to put makeup on a pig, right? Oh yeah, it's not that bad. Don't worry about that. This method, I get a behind the scenes look into the business for a period of time, especially with people who have aging businesses, baby boomers, people who don't have a direct succession plan. My approach is, hey Moshe, I love this business that you have. What are your thoughts about selling it in a couple of years? Well, I've noticed that you don't have these parts figured out, which is what I have deep knowledge about. I think if we could get this figured out in 2 to 3 years when you go to sell the business, we could really grow the value. What a partnership look like where I come on, I take over this, here's a track record of success doing that, and we work together for the next 12 months, 24 months, build a bigger thing, and we could sell it together. It does a couple of things because one, it gives me an inside look at the business. We get a way to work together. 2, I'm not doing all the work. I'm just doing parts of the work that I'm comfortable with. 3, if I do go to buy the business in 1 to 2 years, I'm the most qualified to take it over. And the business owner knows that. But also the SBA knows that. And so it's a different conversation for saying, hey, Mr. Bank, I'm a stranger and I want to buy this business, than saying, hey, I'm a partner and I want to buy out my other partner, of course. We've both ran the business for the past year. And so all ways around, it's just a better approach. And 2, it reduces the amount of upfront capital I have to allocate to getting 20% ownership in the business. And I call that experience for equity. And that's my kind of best approach because I don't want to run a business day to day. I kind of want to be a silent partner. And so that approach works for my lifestyle.
The other word is like sweat equity, right? Sweat equity. So you're building that. What have you seen great on the exit side? Because I always wire from the beginning of any business deal or any real estate deal, the step 1 I go is, what is my end result? What do I want to see? And I put it to paper, which is along the lines, my third partner, the IRS, right? They're my partner 1/3 of the year, typically around that. You work for this, Uncle Sam. Mm-hmm. Are there good strategies that you've seen on the exit? Let's say you've made this $10, $20 million profit, how to deal with that? How to deal with the tax repercussions?
Yeah, there's a few, but all roads lead back to real estate. I believe the best approach, in which I'd love your feedback on, the best approach is really to generate some high income, live below your means, on the spread, invest it passively in the stock market or eventually some real estate. There's no better asset class for tax benefit than real estate. What I have observed, and which realistically I would need to do more of, is as you make a certain amount of income, find real estate to offset that income because, accelerated depreciation, all that stuff. Sure. And so the best founders, what I have seen is if you run a C Corp for a certain number of years, when you sell the assets in that C Corp up to a certain threshold, the number has changed, it's tax-free. The other way to mitigate that is to take your proceeds and invest that in opportunity zone real estate. Build in a business that is attached to real estate that oftentimes has very little to no taxable implications. Or in the year that you do sell, just buy multifamily or commercial property and find out a way to accelerate that depreciation in a way that offsets the amount of taxable liability that you have for the year. Yeah. So, all roads lead to, 2 of the 3 roads lead to real estate.
To real estate. I did see it, which I'm not familiar because I'm mainly a real estate guy, but that's something that I saw with the C Corp. That's an interesting thing. I think when I tell people, okay, they want to start investing in real estate, so there's 2 things where you can start buying or getting into business. The simplest way, if we're going to add value to the listeners, I think of, okay, you buy a 4-family house, FHA loan, first-time home buyer, and you buy a rundown house in a good area, and you do the work and you fix it up, and you live in that house for a year and a day. And you could sell it, appreciation is there, you can do a 1031 exchange on to the next. When it comes to businesses, because maybe SBA may not give you a loan if you don't have good enough credit, so you may have to start with seller financing, but you got to make sure that there's good cash flow, positive cash flow. But that solution with the C corp on the exit, I have to look into this. I want to see if you could just do it over and over again, because maybe it's $10 million, which is a lot.
There's a limit. Yeah.
There's a limit. There's a limit, but that's a great way to build wealth. You buy the
100%.
businesses, you buy a few of them, a few dry cleaners, let's say, for example, and then you roll them together, and then they each have their own C corp, and then you just sell 1, 2, 3, 4, sell them separate, and all of that gain is all tax free. So you've done financial engineering.
Yeah.
2 years, 3 years, boom, and you can make millions.
Yeah, I believe the C corp. There's a minimum thing. I think it's maybe 5 years. It has to be in existence, and there's a threshold for the amount that's tax free. But I mean, there's accountants and CPAs that understand it.
Sure. And by the way, that's disclosure, right?
Correct. This is not financial advice, right?
This is just us talking. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct. Of an approach that I have heard people take, right?
Yeah.
So definitely seek, wise counsel from licensed professionals. But there are ways. But here's the thing also. So many people spend time in avoiding tax, and they're not in a place yet where their income is to the point where it needs to do all this, to jump through hoops. Just focus on adding value to the world. Focus on developing a high income skill set, whether it be selling, whether it be relationship building, capital raising, things that have a lot of leverage, and just make some money first and then worry about how to avoid taxes later. I see so many people are like, yeah, I gotta do all this stuff. I'm like, how much are you making? That's not your problem right now. Like, focus on the snake that's gonna kill you first. You need to make some more income to provide more cushion for you, to have a safety net, to be able to take more risks.
It's funny, I had this tax discussion, and it was actually someone that was pretty successful. And he just looked at me, and I said, what are you gonna do about your tax bill? And he just looked, he's like, to your point, he's like, I'll just make more money, right? I was like, I really love that. They said that way. Yeah, that's true. So, and sometimes if there's no strategy, if you've made a lot of money, you just pay the bill. You pay the bill and then you move on to the next deal, right? But you got to making decisions and taking action and do deals.
Yeah, I guess a clear way of my thought about that is if you make a lot of money and you owe the IRS 100 grand, 200 grand, 300 grand, that's a good problem to have. Now, great, so good is you pay it, but you've made enough money to make this a reality. So actually it's a good, right? The 2/3 that you keep is still great. But great now is where you are proactive and you could even mitigate that third even more. That's an ideal situation, but I don't want people to think that, man, if I don't have these 0 income tax strategies and I'm doing bad, you're still, in the 5% of America. So you're doing great.
Agreed.